I rented the Airbnb because I needed to finish a big project in isolation. My apartment in the city was noisy, crowded, and impossible to focus in. The listing showed a small cabin in a rural area, far from neighbors, tucked into a line of trees near a narrow dirt road. It looked simple, clean, and quiet. The photos showed a living room with a sofa, a small desk, a single bedroom, and a kitchen with basic appliances. The host's reviews emphasized the peace and privacy. That was exactly what I wanted. The drive there took hours through winding roads. The trees closed in, the pavement ended, and gravel took over. By the time I arrived, the sun was low and casting long shadows across the front yard. The cabin was set back from the road, partially hidden by brush and trees. The front porch had peeling paint and a creaking step, but the house itself looked freshly painted. Windows gleamed, the roof had been replaced recently, and the small yard was cleared of debris. I parked, grabbed my bag, and approached the door. The lockbox worked as described. Inside, the air smelled of wood and a faint chemical clean scent. It was colder than outside, but not uncomfortably so. The place looked exactly like the photos. Organized, tidy, neutral colors. Nothing felt off. I spent the first afternoon unpacking, setting up my laptop on the small desk, and arranging my things in the bedroom. The kitchen had a tiny fridge, a stove, and a microwave. I made coffee and sat at the table, looking out the window at the narrow clearing in front of the house. Beyond it, the trees rose steep and dark. A light breeze moved through, shifting leaves and carrying the faint smell of earth and pine. It was quiet, almost too quiet. No birds, no distant cars, no voices. Just wind and the occasional creak of the house settling. The first night was uneventful. I slept lightly, half awake to the sounds of the cabin adjusting. The radiator clicked on and off. Pipes groaned softly. Floorboards shifted. Around 2 in the morning, I woke to a faint tapping sound. It was hard to place at first, soft enough to be wind or a branch against the siding. I listened for a few minutes. The sound repeated, regular, deliberate, coming from the woods on one side of the cabin. I lay back down, telling myself it was a small animal moving through fallen branches. By morning, nothing had changed outside. No footprints, no broken branches, no obvious signs of wildlife. The yard was undisturbed. The next night, I worked late on the project and went to bed closer to midnight. The cabin was dark, the windows reflecting interior lights. Around 1:30 a.m., I heard it again, something different this time. A low scraping sound, slow, moving along the side of the house. Not like an animal, not like the wind, something heavy being dragged across rough ground. My heart rate went up. The sound stopped and started again in the same rhythm, moving past one window, then pausing, then continuing along the back. I lay in bed, holding still, listening. The scraping continued for a few minutes and then disappeared. I told myself it had to be a branch, a fallen log being pushed by the wind, but nothing outside was loose. Nothing that could create that steady, heavy rhythm. I stayed awake for the next hour, too alert to sleep. Morning brought sunlight and normalcy. The cabin looked unchanged, calm. I went outside to inspect the yard. The ground was soft from recent rain. There were no tracks, no signs of anything having passed. The previous night's scraping seemed impossible. I touched the siding, tested the door locks, peered into the trees. Everything appeared ordinary. The calm daylight made the experience feel distant, almost imagined. But the memory of the rhythm, the weight behind it, stayed with me. I tried to ignore it and focus on work during the day. The quiet was both a blessing and a curse. Every sound, every slight movement, became noticeable. The creaks of the floorboards sounded amplified. The hum of the refrigerator carried clearly across the room. The wind through the trees felt like it passed closer than it should have. I grew hyper-aware of every detail. The way shadows shifted in the evening, the reflection of the desk lamp on the window, the way the cabin settled as temperatures dropped. That second night, I left a small lamp on near the window, hoping it would make me feel safer. Around 2:45 a.m., I heard it again, faint at first, then louder. The scraping, deliberate, slow, along the side of the cabin. This time I got up and peered through the window. Nothing moved in the yard. Nothing could be seen beyond the edge of the clearing. The rhythm continued for a few minutes and then stopped. I sat back down, tense, aware that whatever it was, it had access to the cabin's perimeter without leaving evidence in daylight. It was invisible and careful. The third morning, I checked the property from a different angle. The soil was soft, but I still found no tracks. The scraping from the nights before had left no trace. I walked around the perimeter, inspecting trees and brush. Everything looked normal. The clearing was untouched. Yet I could not shake the feeling that someone or something had been there, moving deliberately, weighing each step, avoiding detection. By the final night, I had learned the cabin's rhythms. The radiator clicked every 30 minutes. Pipes groaned. The wind shifted through the trees. I lay in bed, aware of the usual sounds and the abnormal ones. Around 1:30 a.m., the scraping started again. This time I was ready. I sat up and listened carefully. I realized it always moved in the same path, a measured loop along the side and back of the clearing, avoiding the front door, never approaching the windows directly. It wasn't aggressive. It wasn't chaotic. It was routine, methodical, almost like someone checking boundaries. Morning brought the usual calm. I packed quietly and left, taking care not to disturb anything. As I drove away, the cabin looked peaceful, benign. The trees swayed gently. The clearing was empty, sunlight glinting off the roof. It was easy to imagine arriving at the same house on a summer morning and finding nothing unusual, nothing threatening. Yet the memory of the scraping, deliberate and heavy, haunted me. I could not explain it. No footprints, no evidence, nothing in daylight. The cabin above the clearing was safe, normal, but the nights had revealed a precision in movement that I could not account for. Weeks later, I researched the property. It had been an old homestead before being converted into an Airbnb. No record of anyone living nearby. Neighbors were rare. The previous occupants had sold decades ago. No known incidents, no complaints. Legally, everything checked out. Mechanically, nothing should have caused the scraping or movement. Yet I knew what I had heard. The ending became clear as I reflected on it. The cabin was safe, the clearing empty during the day, the trees still, the building structurally sound. The scraping was real but inexplicable. It could have been the wind shifting fallen branches in an unusual way, the settling of the cabin combined with frozen soil, or some mechanical quirk of underground pipes. None of it mattered as much as the realization that the place I thought was completely ordinary had patterns and rhythms I could not predict or fully understand. The calm and order above, the hidden weight and motion below, existed side by side. The cabin was not dangerous, not chaotic, but it reminded me how easily the ordinary can conceal something that unsettles without leaving evidence, and how intensely real fear can be when nothing about a place is overtly wrong, yet something feels carefully, deliberately off. We booked the Airbnb for a hiking trip because the photos showed wide red rock views and nothing else. No neighbors, no fences, no roads in sight. Just open land and a small modern house set back from a dirt drive. We wanted quiet mornings, long hikes, and clean light for photos. The price made sense for the area. The listing talked about privacy and isolation. That was exactly what we wanted. The host messaged often after we booked. Short messages, friendly tone, reminders about check-in, reminders about the rules, reminders about enjoying the views. Nothing threatening, but constant. Each message arrived within minutes of the last. We stopped responding after confirming the code and arrival time. The messages kept coming anyway. We assumed the host was lonely or bored. It did not feel important at the time. The drive-in took us off the highway onto smaller roads, then gravel. The land opened up into flat desert broken by red stone formations that caught the sun. The house sat alone at the end of the drive. No other tire tracks crossed the road. No buildings nearby. The wind moved dry brush across the ground in slow lines. The house looked newer in person than in the photos. Clean lines, metal roof, large windows facing the rocks. A lockbox was mounted beside the front door, but the listing said the door used a keypad. We used the code the host sent. The door unlocked with a soft beep and opened easily. Inside, the place felt staged but not fake. Light furniture, neutral colors, framed landscape photos that matched the view outside. Everything smelled clean. No strange odors. No signs of wear beyond normal use. The bedrooms were small but tidy. The living room windows looked straight out toward the rocks, which glowed orange as the sun dropped. We unpacked, cooked dinner, and went through our plans for the next day. Phones showed weak signal. Internet worked but slowed often. Once it got dark, the area outside vanished. No distant lights. No sound except wind brushing the house. The first night felt normal. We went to bed tired from the drive. Sometime after midnight, I woke briefly and checked the time out of habit. It was quiet. The house made soft, settling noises as temperatures dropped. I fell back asleep without thinking. The sound that woke us again felt different. Tires on gravel, slow and controlled. Not passing by. Approaching. I checked the time. Around 1:40 a.m. The sound stopped close to the house. An engine idled for a few seconds, then shut off. We lay still. No headlights crossed the windows. No doors slammed. The silence afterward felt heavier than before. We told ourselves it was the owner checking something. Maybe water, maybe power. The listing mentioned maintenance visits during the day, but nothing about night. Then the keypad beeped once. The sound carried through the house clearly. A single tone. The door did not open. We waited, breathing shallow, listening for movement. Nothing followed. No knock, no footsteps, no engine starting again. We did not move. We kept the lights off. The minutes stretched without sound. After a while, the wind returned. The house settled again. We stayed awake longer than needed, then drifted back into uneasy sleep. Morning light came sharp and bright. The desert looked calm and empty again. From the window, we could see fresh tire tracks in the gravel drive. They were clear and recent, deeper than our own from the day before. They stopped near the house and turned around. We checked our phones. No message from the host. No explanation. No note about stopping by. The message history ended with cheerful reminders sent the day before. We walked the perimeter of the house in daylight. Everything looked normal at first. Doors locked. Windows closed. No damage. The quiet felt different now. Less peaceful, more exposed. The distance to the nearest road felt longer. While checking the side of the house, I noticed the breaker box mounted on the exterior wall. It was metal, slightly rusted at the edges with a loose latch. That alone was not strange. Many houses have exterior breakers. What stood out was the tape. A strip of weathered tape ran along the back edge of the box, partly hidden from view. I pulled the box open. Inside were the switches, labeled in faded marker. Taped to the inside wall was a spare key. Not loose, not hidden deep, just stuck there, exactly where someone experienced would place it. Easy to reach, easy to remember, invisible unless you looked. The meaning hit immediately. Anyone who knew to check a breaker box could find it. Any guest who had stayed before and noticed it could return. The keypad code did not matter if a physical key existed. The lockbox by the door suddenly felt pointless. We stood there longer than needed, staring at the key. The events of the night replayed with new clarity. The slow approach, the engine stopping close, the keypad attempt. Whoever came knew the code or guessed it or tried it from habit. When it failed, they did not force entry. They did not knock. They left quietly, confident in another option or deciding against using it. The host still had not messaged. The friendliness from before felt wrong in hindsight. Too attentive before arrival. Silent afterward. We checked the listing again. No mention of spare keys. No warning about maintenance access. No rules about surprise visits. We packed that morning instead of hiking. The views outside the windows no longer felt inviting. They felt isolating in a different way. The same emptiness that looked peaceful in photos now felt like a lack of witnesses. Before leaving, we documented everything. Photos of the tracks. Photos of the breaker box and the key. Timestamps. We locked the door and returned the key to the tape, exactly as we found it. Removing it felt like crossing a line we did not want to cross. As we drove away, the gravel swallowed our tracks behind us. The house disappeared quickly once the road bent. The rocks remained, bright and silent, unchanged by what had happened. Later that day, back in an area with signal, we contacted the platform. We sent the photos and explained the night. The response came hours later, polite and vague, promising review. The host sent a message shortly after that, cheerful again, asking if everything was okay and if we enjoyed the stay. The timing felt deliberate. The fear did not come from believing someone meant us harm. It came from understanding how easy it would have been for harm to happen without effort. A house with no neighbors, a visible spare key, a code that could be tested without consequence. The security was an illusion created by clean design and friendly messages. Nothing supernatural occurred. No strange figures, no threats, just a poorly protected house and the knowledge that access was shared in ways we were never told. That knowledge stayed with us longer than the sound of the gravel or the beep of the keypad. We did not report the place as dangerous. We reported it as careless. That felt more accurate and somehow more unsettling. We stayed above an old butcher shop that had been converted into an Airbnb. The building had the kind of narrow, pressed-in feel that comes from age. The front of the shop had large display windows, the kind that caught the streetlights at night and reflected the empty road. The shop itself was long closed. The paint on the sign had peeled so badly that only half of the letters were legible. The landlord, or whoever managed the Airbnb, said it had been shuttered for years, and the upstairs had been recently renovated to feel like a small apartment. The walls were clean, fresh paint, neutral tones. The hardwood floor had been sanded and varnished. Everything smelled new, too new, almost sterile, which was jarring above the old tile and brick of the shop below. The first evening was quiet. The building creaked in the expected ways. Heating pipes groaned softly. The radiator in the bedroom clicked on and off. We unpacked slowly. The kitchen was minimal. A small fridge, 2 burners, a microwave. Cabinets opened easily, doors aligned perfectly. It felt clean, orderly, almost unnervingly perfect. The only clue to the building's history was the view through the small kitchen window. Looking down, you could see the glass doors of the shop below, dark and sealed, but the tiled floor, scuffed and stained, showed years of heavy use. The first night passed uneventfully, though I noticed the hum. It started softly around the time we went to bed, just low enough to almost blend in with the radiator. The sound came from below, a mechanical vibration, a low whine. I assumed it was some leftover equipment left in the shop, old refrigeration units or freezers still wired to the grid. I didn't think much of it. Buildings that old always had quirks. Around 3 a.m., I woke to a different sound. At first, it was subtle, a thump that made me shift in the bed. Then it came again, heavier, dragging across the tile below. The sound of metal scraping over tile. Not one single step, not light. A weight moving, something deliberate. My stomach turned. It lasted for what felt like a long minute before stopping abruptly. I held my breath, listening for any follow-up, any repeat. The building went quiet again, except for the low hum of the radiators. I lay awake, watching the ceiling, trying to tell myself it was normal. Old buildings settle, pipes vibrate, equipment kicks on, but the timing, the rhythm, the unmistakable scrape across tile didn't fit any normal explanation I could think of. The floor below the shop had no tenants, no open doors, nothing, according to the listing. Everything should have been silent. Morning light felt sudden, almost aggressive, cutting through the thin curtains. We got up slowly, moving around the apartment, testing switches. That's when I noticed it. The power to the entire building was off. No lights, no kitchen outlets, no radiator. Only the shop below had power. The hum of refrigeration units continued, faint but steady, as though the shop itself were alive. We stepped closer to the kitchen window and looked down. The tile floor glistened in the morning light. Nothing visibly moving. No sign of anyone. but the mechanical sound never ceased. The place felt wrong in a way I couldn't immediately articulate. It was clean, safe-looking, perfect for a weekend stay. Sheets washed, towels stacked, the kitchen pristine. Yet the hum, the scrape, the selective power, all of it suggested activity we weren't supposed to witness. The apartment felt perched on top of something unknown, a fragile ceiling above an active ground. The contrast between the cleanliness above and the mysterious functioning below was disorienting. We moved cautiously. I checked all the outlets, testing the breakers. Nothing worked upstairs. The kitchen light flickered once and died. I checked the doors. Locked tight. Windows latched. Nothing indicated a fault. Yet the shop continued its quiet activity, as though someone or something was occupying the space below while we slept above. The hum was steady now, uniform, almost methodical. I wondered about old refrigeration equipment, what it would take to keep such machinery running while cutting power to everything else. Older freezers often ran off separate circuits. Could someone have secretly maintained the shop, leaving the rest of the building dormant? The idea made sense mechanically, but it did nothing to ease the unease. If someone was in there, why leave the apartment open, available for guests, above an active space no one mentioned? We dressed slowly and walked around the apartment, touching walls, floors, doors. Everything upstairs was ordinary, safe. We opened the bedroom window to see the street outside. Empty, quiet. The sun reflected off peeling brick and chipped paint on the old sign. It didn't look threatening, but the memory of that scrape, heavy and deliberate, stayed. I pictured it happening again, now with a clear outline of motion across the tile, step by step, dragging. The distance between us and the floor below made every sound more amplified, more deliberate. I realized how easy it was to imagine someone moving through that space at will, completely hidden from our view. We gathered our things and prepared to leave. As we pulled open the front door of the apartment, the smell hit me. Cold air, slightly metallic, like old meat lockers, faint but unmistakable. It filled the stairwell, brushing past us as we stepped down to the street. I realized the smell had been faintly present the night before, drowned out by fatigue, but it was real, a tangible link to whatever had been active below. Outside, the street was quiet, sunlight bouncing off empty asphalt. The apartment building looked ordinary from the outside. No alarms, no warning signs, just another structure in a block of similar aged buildings. Yet we left with the memory of that sound in our minds, the scrape, the hum, the selective power, and the smell. Every step toward our car made me more aware of how precariously ordinary the place appeared. Weeks later, I researched the building's history. The butcher shop had indeed closed decades ago. Records confirmed that. Renovation permits showed that the apartment had been created recently, but there were no clear records of wiring changes for the shop. It was possible the refrigeration units had been maintained off the grid, using a separate circuit the city never updated on public records. It explained the power situation logically, but did nothing for the memory of that scrape at 3 a.m., heavy, deliberate, unnerving. The ending became clear to me in retrospect. The apartment was real, safe, and legal. The shop was likely running on old, separate circuits to maintain equipment or as part of a small-scale cold storage operation. The noise we heard, the scrape, was almost certainly someone moving equipment quietly in the shop, maintaining the refrigeration, dragging supplies across tile. Nothing supernatural, nothing intentionally malicious, just an old building adapted in a way that was partly hidden and overlooked in the listing. The deliberate hum, the scrape, the selective power, they were normal from a mechanical and operational standpoint. What stayed with me was how carefully ordinary it all seemed above. Fresh paint, perfect towels, stocked kitchen, no chaos. It was the contrast that unnerved me, the cleanliness and comfort directly above a working, hidden space I had no access to and no explanation for at the time. Once understood, it made sense, but the unease lingered, the memory of being unaware, sleeping above an active, unknown space, hearing each scrape across tile amplified in the quiet of the night. Everything was normal, everything was legal, yet nothing felt entirely comfortable until we drove away, leaving the building behind, imagining the hum and scrape continuing in the dim, tiled space below. I booked the house because it was cheap and close to the courthouse. I was there for a hearing that had already dragged on for months, and I needed somewhere quiet where I could sleep, shower, and review paperwork without spending money I did not have. The listing showed a small single-story place in an older neighborhood. Clean enough, neutral. The photos were sparse, which I took as a good sign. No decorations staged for attention, just rooms and furniture. I arrived late afternoon. The key was in a lockbox. The yard was overgrown but not abandoned. Grass tall at the edges, trimmed closer to the walkway. The front door opened easily. Inside smelled faintly of laundry soap and old wood. The air felt lived in, not stale. The house was cooler than outside, which suggested someone had been managing it recently. The layout was simple. Living room, kitchen, hallway with 2 bedrooms and a bathroom. 1 bedroom matched the listing. A basic adult space with a full bed and plain dresser. The second door was closed. The listing did not mention a second bedroom, but I assumed it was locked or used for storage. I unpacked lightly. 1 bag, a folder with court documents, my laptop. I checked the bathroom, ran the shower to make sure it worked, then went back to the hallway and opened the second door. It was a child's room, not themed, not staged, real. A small bed with a cartoon blanket folded at the foot. Shelves with plastic toys lined in rows, not randomly tossed. Crayons in a cup on a low desk. Drawings taped to the wall with uneven strips of tape. Houses, stick figures, trees, dates written in careful block letters at the bottom of each page. The dates were from the past 2 weeks. I stood there longer than I should have. The room smelled faintly of sweat and fabric softener. The air was warmer than the rest of the house, as if the door had been closed recently. I touched the desk surface. No dust. The floor was clean but not empty. A sock sat half under the bed. I checked the listing again. No mention of a child's room. No mention of shared space. The house was listed as entire place. I told myself it was leftover. Previous tenant. A staging mistake. The dates bothered me, but I explained them away as a parent trying to sell the place and keeping their child occupied during showings. That night, I slept poorly. Court stress already had me on edge. Around 3 in the morning, I woke sweating. The room felt warmer than before. I lay still and listened. No sounds from outside. No cars. No voices. I turned onto my side and noticed the heat was coming from the other side of the wall. The wall shared space with the child's room. I got up and walked down the hall. The door to the child's room was open. I had closed it earlier. The bed covers were rumpled, not how they had been when I first saw them. I stood near the doorway and felt it then. The mattress held warmth, not leftover from the day. Body warmth. I did not touch anything else. I closed the door and went back to bed. I told myself the house held heat unevenly. I told myself my stress was filling gaps with fear. I slept until my alarm. In the morning, the house looked the same. No mess, no noise. I checked the locks. All intact. The windows were secured. No sign of forced entry. I made coffee and went to court. When I returned that afternoon, the child's room looked slightly different. Not enough to notice at first glance. The toys on the shelf were shifted. A small car that had been facing left now faced right. The sock was gone. One drawing on the wall had been replaced with another. Same paper. New picture. New date. That day's date. I stood very still and felt the house around me. The quiet felt deliberate, like it was being maintained. I checked the rest of the rooms. Nothing else had changed. My bag was where I left it. My documents were untouched. I messaged the host through the app, asking about the extra room. The reply came hours later, short and calm, stating that no one lived there anymore and that the room was not in use. No apology. No explanation for the dates. I did not press further. That night, I placed a thin strip of folded paper in the doorway of the child's room before going to sleep. Not obvious, just enough that it would fall if the door opened. I also placed one at the front door. I locked everything and went to bed. I woke before dawn. The house was silent. I checked the hallway. The paper by the child's room lay flat on the floor. The front door paper was still in place. I stood in the doorway again and felt the warmth in the bed. Fresh. The blanket had been folded differently. A stuffed animal sat near the pillow that had not been there before. I sat on the edge of my bed and tried to slow my breathing. This was not a ghost. This was not something unreal. This was a person, likely a child. Someone small enough to move quietly. Someone with access. I checked the exterior of the house in daylight. The yard backed up to a narrow strip of trees and a drainage path. The fence had a loose panel near the back corner. Not broken, just unfastened. I followed the path a short distance and found footprints in the soft dirt. Small shoes, worn soles. I returned inside and examined the house more carefully. In the child's room, I found a vent cover that had been loosened. Behind it was a crawl space access, narrow but passable. Dust disturbed. Handprints along the wood beam. This house connected to others through old utility passages that were never sealed properly. The host never entered the house. There were no signs of adult presence. No extra food missing. No adult toiletries used. The locks were never touched. Someone else came and went without using doors. That evening, I packed everything. I did not stay another night. I cleaned the kitchen and left the house as I found it. Before leaving, I took photos of the room, the dates, the crawl space. I sent them to the platform and to local services once I was safe and away. Later, records confirmed the house had once been part of a larger property divided years ago. The crawl spaces still connected. One neighboring unit was condemned. A family had lived there until recently. A child had been reported missing during relocation. The search focused on streets and parks. No one thought to check the walls. I did not return to that house. My hearing concluded weeks later. The case moved on. What stayed with me was the calm order of that room, the care in the drawings, the way the bed was made each day. The house was cheap because it was not empty. It was occupied in a way listings do not show. The host never lied outright. They simply never entered, and neither should I have stayed. We booked the place because it sat alone at the edge of a long stretch of managed forest, the kind that looked wild but showed signs of careful ownership. Straight tree lines in places, old cut stumps softened by moss, access roads that faded into grass. We needed quiet airspace for drone footage, no power lines, no neighbors, no weekend traffic. The listing showed a simple cabin with clean angles and wide windows. The host message came through right after booking, short and polite, warning us not to leave food outside and not to wander far off the marked clearing. I read it as routine. Bears, raccoons, the usual concerns. The drive-in took longer than expected. The last paved road turned to gravel, then to packed dirt with shallow ruts that tugged at the tires. Tree cover closed in until the sky narrowed to a thin strip overhead. The cabin appeared suddenly, not set back but placed square in the clearing like it belonged there. No fence. No barrier, just trees stopping short as if they had been told where to end. Inside, everything felt normal. Clean floors, neutral smell, no clutter. The windows were large and uncovered, glass running from waist height to near the ceiling. You could see straight into the forest from almost anywhere in the room. That felt intentional, like the place was meant to watch and be watched. We unpacked equipment first. Cases lined along the wall. Batteries charging, camera gear laid out on the table. Food stayed sealed and inside, mostly because it was easier than hauling coolers in and out. The forest stayed quiet through the evening. No bird calls after sunset, no insects brushing against the screens. Wind moved high up, not near the ground. When darkness settled, it did so evenly, not the patchy kind broken by nearby houses or roads. The cabin lights reflected faintly in the glass. Outside was solid black between the trunks. I was reviewing footage at the table when movement passed the front window. Not fast, not sudden. It crossed from left to right at a steady pace, blocking out the lighter gray of the trees behind it. My eyes followed it without my body reacting at first. The shape was upright, long, The top of it moved higher than the door frame. There was no sound tied to it. No footfall, no brush snapping, just the sense of weight transferring through the ground. A low vibration I felt through the floorboards rather than heard. It did not turn its head. It did not pause. It did not look in. It passed as if the cabin was a known obstacle already mapped, already accounted for. When it cleared the window, the darkness returned to its previous shape. I stood and checked the porch light. It cast a weak circle over the steps and dirt beyond. Nothing moved through it. The forest stayed closed. The trees did not sway at ground level. The dirt showed no fresh marks, no scuffs, no deep impressions. I stood there longer than necessary, listening for breathing, for fabric, for any trace of a person moving away. There was nothing. We did not sleep much. The night stayed quiet but tense, the way a room feels after something heavy has been moved through it. The cabin itself made normal sounds. Wood cooling, a faint hum from the fridge. No more movement past the windows. Morning came slowly, light filtering in gray and flat. At first light, we walked the perimeter of the clearing. The ground was firm, packed hard by years of weather and use. Pine needles pressed into soil. It would have shown marks if something heavy had crossed close. We found nothing. No tracks, no broken stems, no signs of someone circling the building. The forest beyond the clearing thickened quickly, undergrowth tangling low to the ground. It did not look like a place anyone would walk through upright without effort. We flew the drone late morning, keeping it high and slow. The forest stretched unbroken in every direction, cut only by faint lines where old roads had grown over. No cabins, no camps, no vehicles. The footage looked perfect. Clean light, long shadows, a smooth canopy. We landed and secured the drone inside, closed the cases, locked the door out of habit even though there was no reason to. The second evening felt heavier, not louder, not more active, just dense. The air pressed closer. We ate early and cleaned thoroughly. No scraps, no wrappers, everything sealed. We checked the windows again before dark. When night settled, it did so faster. Sometime after midnight, I woke with the sense of being observed, not watched through glass but measured, like space itself was being evaluated. I lay still, listening. The forest stayed silent. Then I felt it again, that low pressure through the ground, as if something had shifted its weight nearby. It moved slower this time, close enough that the vibration felt stronger, clearer. Still no sound. Past one window, then another, tracing the outline of the cabin. It did not try the door. It did not touch the walls. It moved with care, like it understood where the structure ended and where it began. When it reached the porch, the pressure stopped. I waited for the sound of steps on wood. There was none. After a long stretch, the pressure resumed, moving away, dissolving back into the forest. Morning came sharp and bright. I opened the door and froze. The drone sat on the porch, centered, legs folded neatly beneath it. The case was still inside, closed and latched. The drone was clean. No dirt, no scratches. It had been handled with precision, placed, not dropped. We checked the footage from the previous day. Nothing unusual. No figures. No movement that did not match wind or shadow. We walked the clearing again. The porch boards showed no marks. The dirt below held nothing new. No signs of someone approaching from the road. There were no neighbors close enough to wander over. No reason for anyone to handle expensive equipment without taking it. No sign of curiosity or theft. Just the return of an object placed where it would be seen. We did not speculate out loud. There was no need. The pattern was clear enough. Whatever moved through that space understood the layout. It recognized objects as separate from the land. It respected the structure as a boundary but not a barrier. Could pick up something fragile and set it down without damage. It did not want food. It did not want entry. It wanted acknowledgement. We packed fast and without order. Cases went into the car half open. Clothes stayed folded on the bed. We did not check the footage again. We did not take photos of the porch. The cabin stayed clean. Nothing was broken. The host had been honest. The place itself was fine. As we drove out, the forest closed behind us the same way it had opened, calm and unchanged. No movement followed the road. No shape crossed the trees. The pressure faded as the tires hit gravel, then pavement. Only later, miles away, did my body relax enough to notice how tense it had been. I left a short review later that week. Accurate, polite. I did not mention the nights. I did not mention the drone. The warning about food stayed in place. The listing remains active. The cabin still sits where the trees stop. I know now that some land is not empty just because it looks unmanaged. Some places are occupied in ways that do not announce themselves. They do not chase. They do not threaten. They observe, interact, and correct. We were not meant to stay long, and we were allowed to leave without consequence. That was the limit of the permission granted, and we did not test it further. I rented the place for work because my job had gone fully remote and my apartment had become too loud to think. I needed quiet and a stable internet connection, nothing else. The listing showed a small house on a residential street, not isolated but calm. The price made sense for a monthly stay. The reviews mentioned how organized the place was. Several people used the word orderly. I took that as a positive sign. The check-in was simple. Code on the door, no meeting. Inside, the house felt prepared for long stays. Desk by a window, office chair that did not wobble, router mounted high on the wall. The air smelled neutral, not overly cleaned. Everything worked. I noticed the notes on the first day while putting groceries away. Inside the cabinet under the sink, a small laminated card was taped to the wall. It read "Trash, Tuesday." The letters were printed, not handwritten. The lamination was thick, the corners rounded from age. I assumed it was meant to be helpful. In the cabinet above the stove, another card was taped near the hinge. Windows, 9 p.m. In the hallway closet, near the light switch, lights off, 10:30. Each note used the same font. Each one was laminated the same way. None mentioned a year or a name. They felt more permanent than reminders usually are. At first I thought they were left by a previous guest who liked structure. But the lamination suggested intent beyond a short stay. I checked the edges of the tape. The adhesive had yellowed slightly. The notes had been there a long time. The house itself followed the rules. At night, the temperature dropped slightly after 10. The exterior lights turned off at the same time each night. The internet reset briefly just before midnight, always the same short interruption. Around 9 in the evening, I began hearing movement in the walls. At first it sounded like pipes adjusting to temperature. A soft knock, then another, then a pause. The pattern repeated. 3 knocks spaced evenly, then silence. It happened almost every night. The timing lined up with the note about windows. I started paying attention. At 9, the heating system shifted. 10:30, the house settled again. The noises were not random. They followed a routine. Felt like the building was checking itself. I worked during the day and stayed focused. The house helped with that. Stayed quiet. No neighbors played loud music. No dogs barked. The street outside looked empty most of the time. I rarely saw people pass by the front window. One evening, I stayed up later than usual. I had a deadline and lost track of time. The light stayed on past 10:30. I did not think about the note until the breaker tripped. Everything went dark at once. The computer shut off. The heater stopped. The sudden silence felt sharp. I went to the breaker panel in the hallway. It was labeled neatly. Each switch had a printed tag. I flipped the main breaker back on. Power returned immediately. Nothing else happened that night. No more noises. No alerts. I finished my work and went to bed. The next morning, I found a message from the host asking if I had trouble sleeping. The timing made my stomach tighten. I had not mentioned the outage. I had not reported anything. The platform did not notify hosts about brief power interruptions caused by guests. I did not reply right away. I checked the breaker panel again. A small device was mounted beside it, wired into the system. I had missed it before. It looked like a monitoring unit, the kind used to track energy use. It had a small indicator light that blinked slowly. I searched the model number online. It was part of a smart energy management system. It logged usage patterns, outages, and manual resets. It could send alerts when routines were interrupted. The notes made sense then. They were not suggestions. They were the schedule the house was set to follow. Lights off at 10:30, windows closed by 9. Trash on Tuesday. The house had been trained around those times, likely when the owner lived there before renting it out. The knocking in the walls was the system adjusting valves and dampers. The heating and water lines were controlled in zones, opening and closing on a timer. The sounds followed the routine because the routine was built into the structure. I realized the breaker trip might not have been a fault. The system could shut power if usage exceeded expectations during off hours. Staying up late, lights on, computer running, heater active all at once may have triggered it. The host asking about my sleep was not concern. It was confirmation. He knew the routine had been broken. He knew when the breaker was reset. He knew someone was awake past the expected time. I checked the listing again. Buried in the details was a line about energy efficiency and smart home features. It did not mention monitoring habits, only consumption. Over the next few days, I tested nothing. I followed the schedule. At 9, I closed the windows. At 10:30, I turned off the lights. The house stayed quiet. The pipes knocked on time. No messages came. I considered leaving early, but the explanation removed some of the fear. The house was not watching in a personal way. It was enforcing a routine that had been set long before me. The host relied on the system to keep order, to protect the property, to know when something changed. The problem was not danger. It was control. The house expected compliance. When I broke it, the system reacted, and the host noticed. Before I left at the end of the month, I removed nothing. I did not touch the notes. I cleaned and packed and locked the door. On my way out, I noticed another laminated card taped inside the breaker panel door. It read "System check nightly." That was the last piece I needed. The place was not meant to adapt to guests. Guests were meant to adapt to it. The routines kept the house predictable. The monitoring kept the host informed without needing contact. I did not report the listing. Nothing illegal had happened. The place was quiet, safe, and exactly as advertised in most ways. But I never forgot how the house reacted when I stayed awake too late, and how quickly someone noticed without being told. We booked it for a delayed honeymoon because life kept getting in the way. Work schedules, family issues, money, then time passing faster than we expected. When we finally chose a place, we wanted calm and privacy. Nothing flashy. The listing showed a restored house on the edge of a small town, close to vineyards and quiet roads. The reviews praised cleanliness, comfort, and the host's attention to detail. That phrase showed up more than once. Attention to detail felt reassuring at the time. After booking, the host sent a long message about arrival. Check-in was listed as contactless, but he insisted on greeting us in person. He framed it as hospitality, a personal touch, wanting to make sure everything met expectations. We preferred privacy and said contactless was fine. He agreed quickly, almost too easily, and said he would still be nearby if needed. The drive there felt like a release. 2 lanes, open sky, fields turning gold in the afternoon light. We talked about small plans, morning walks, late breakfasts, photos we never had time to take before. The house appeared at the end of a narrow street lined with trees. It looked exactly like the photos. Fresh paint, trimmed hedges, clean windows. The kind of place that looked cared for in a deliberate way. When we pulled into the driveway, the house was quiet. No car parked nearby, no person waiting. As we stepped out and opened the trunk, I noticed movement in an upstairs window. Curtain shifted, then settled. I stopped what I was doing and looked up. The window reflected sky and leaves. Nothing else moved. I told myself it was air from an open window or fabric settling. Old houses move. We unlocked the door using the code provided. Inside, the house smelled warm and clean. Fresh bread sat on the kitchen counter wrapped in cloth. A welcome note rested beside it, handwritten, neat. Towels were folded evenly in the bathroom. The bed was made tight, corners sharp. Everything felt prepared, not just cleaned, but arranged with care. The house had 2 floors, living spaces downstairs, bedrooms upstairs. The stairs creaked softly but evenly. No dust on the steps, no clutter anywhere. The place felt calm in a controlled way, like a hotel pretending to be a home. We unpacked and tried to settle into the mood we came for. I kept thinking about the curtain. I checked the upstairs rooms. Both were empty. Closets held extra linens sealed in plastic. Windows were closed and latched. The air inside was still. Evening came quietly. We cooked simple food, ate at the small table, and talked about nothing important. Outside, the street stayed empty. No passing cars. No voices. The town felt paused. Before bed, I noticed something on the kitchen table that had not been there earlier. A single sheet of paper placed squarely near the center. At first I thought it was the welcome note moved, but it was different. It was a printed photo. The image showed the driveway, our car, the trunk open, us standing beside it lifting bags. The angle was high, slightly tilted downward. The timestamp sat in the corner. It matched our arrival time exactly. I felt cold before I understood why. The photo quality was sharp, taken from close range. Not from the street, not from a neighbor's yard. The perspective was from inside the house, upstairs, looking out. I picked it up carefully. The paper was warm, not fresh from a printer, but not cold either. No dust on it. No fingerprints that stood out. It had been placed there intentionally after we arrived. We checked the windows again. Upstairs, one window overlooked the driveway. The same window where the curtain had moved. I stood there and compared the angle. It matched. I searched for cameras. I checked corners, shelves, smoke detectors. Nothing obvious. No blinking lights. No wires. The house remained perfect. No signs of panic, no mess, no rush. A message arrived on my phone minutes later. The host said he hoped we settled in well and asked if everything looked good. I replied about the photo, attaching an image of it on the table. The response came quickly. He said it was for security records, a standard practice to document guest arrival in case of disputes or damage claims. He said the camera was part of the security system. The explanation did not fit the facts. The camera angle was from inside. No security system should record from a private interior space without disclosure. The listing mentioned outdoor cameras only facing the driveway. Even if that were true, the angle did not match any exterior placement. This image came from inside the house, from a lived-in vantage point. I walked through the rooms again with different eyes. The cleanliness no longer felt comforting, felt maintained. The bread felt less like a gift and more like a signal that someone knew exactly when we arrived. The note, the towels, the timing all lined up too well. We did not sleep. We stayed downstairs with lights on, bags repacked, keys in hand. Nothing else happened during the night. No footsteps, no sounds upstairs. The silence pressed in harder than noise would have. Morning light revealed nothing new. The street looked ordinary. The house looked welcoming. If someone passed by, they would see a calm place ready for guests. We left early without eating the bread or using the shower. We locked the door and drove away. Once on the road, the explanation became clear in pieces. The host insisted on greeting guests because he wanted to confirm who arrived. When that did not happen, he observed from inside, using an interior camera placed upstairs, likely disguised or hidden well enough to avoid casual detection. The printed photo served as proof of access and control, a way to remind guests they were seen. It was not meant to scare us into leaving, but to establish awareness. The house was not unsafe in a dramatic way. There was no violence, no threat, no chaos. It was managed. The reviews stayed perfect because nothing overt happened. Guests felt watched but not harmed. Most likely ignored the feeling and enjoyed the comfort. We reported the listing with evidence once we reached a hotel. The platform responded with a formal acknowledgement and later confirmed the property was under investigation. The host account disappeared weeks later. What stayed with me was not fear in the usual sense. It was realizing how easily control can hide behind politeness and order. The house did not feel broken. It felt designed to observe without drawing attention. Clean surfaces, predictable routines, everything normal enough to pass without question. That realization followed us longer than the trip itself. The honeymoon became a memory shaped by that house, not by romance or rest. A place where nothing went wrong, yet everything felt wrong once understood. I went there after my dad passed because I needed silence that did not ask questions. Snow felt honest. Cold felt clean. I did not want friends, bars, or familiar rooms filled with things that reminded me of him. I wanted a place where time moved slow and nothing waited for me. The listing showed a small cabin surrounded by trees and white ground. No neighbors, no television, limited signal. It looked like a pause. The drive took me farther than I expected. The road narrowed, then disappeared under packed snow. Plow marks guided the last miles. The cabin sat back from the road, half hidden by pines. Smoke did not rise from the chimney. The place looked closed even though it was mine for the week. The lockbox worked. The door opened without resistance. Inside, the cabin was clean in a careful way. Floors swept, surfaces bare, furniture placed with space between items. The heat was already on, set low. The air smelled of dry wood and old insulation. I noticed the mirrors right away because there were none. Not above the sink, not in the bathroom, not even small reflective surfaces. The toaster was matte. The microwave door was solid metal. I checked out of curiosity more than concern. The host had mentioned it briefly in the listing notes. Mirrors removed to avoid damage. I accepted that explanation without thought. Cabins get rough use. Glass breaks. It made sense in a simple way. I unpacked slowly. I placed my coat on a hook, boots by the door, bag on the bed. The bedroom was small and windowless. The bed frame was bolted to the floor. The nightstand was heavy and plain. The bathroom light flickered once, then steadied. The shower worked. The water pressure was strong. Outside, the snow was deep and undisturbed. No tracks near the cabin except my own from the car. The trees held their branches low. The quiet felt thick. Sound did not travel far. I walked a short distance from the cabin and turned back. It looked less like a home from the outside and more like a structure meant to hold out weather. Thick walls, few windows. The front window was narrow and set high. The first evening passed without incident. I cooked simple food, ate standing, and went to bed early. Sleep came uneven. Grief does that. I woke often and stared at the ceiling. Without mirrors, I felt less aware of myself, which I appreciated. The first sound came late. Heavy steps in snow, slow and steady. Not rushing, not dragging. They moved along one side of the cabin, then stopped. I held still and listened. Wind did not match the rhythm. Animals moved lighter, faster. These steps pressed down with weight. After a pause, they continued, circling. I told myself it was someone passing through. A snowshoer, a ranger. The cabin sat on public land edges. People wandered. The steps moved on and faded. I did not hear voices. I did not hear tools. The quiet returned. In the morning, the tracks were there. Deep impressions spaced far apart. Too wide for normal walking. Each print sank deep into the snow crust. The shape was unclear at the edges, rounded and broad. I crouched and studied them. Snowshoes crossed my mind, but the pattern did not match the rental types I knew. The spacing suggested long strides. The depth suggested weight. The tracks formed a slow loop around the cabin, careful not to approach the door or windows. They ended near the trees, where the snow drifted deeper. No return trail led back to the road. I spent the day inside. The light stayed low despite the snow glare. The cabin absorbed sound. Even my steps felt muted. I read, cooked, and stared out the window. The absence of mirrors began to feel deliberate in a way I could not name. Without reflections, the space felt less personal, more neutral. Like a waiting room, that night the steps returned. Later this time, slower, they paused longer at the back of the cabin. I counted them without meaning to. 1, 2, 3. The pattern stayed consistent. The snow compressed with each step. No slipping, no hesitation. The steps moved away after several minutes. I did not check outside until morning. The tracks overlapped the previous ones, deepening the path. They followed the same careful circle. I noticed something else then. A small pole near the tree line with a box mounted on it, half buried by snow. I had missed it before. The box faced the cabin. I walked closer. It was a wildlife camera, the kind used by forestry services. A laminated tag hung beneath it with a number and a logo. State Land Management. The cabin suddenly made more sense. The heavy construction, the minimal windows, the lack of glass inside. Mirrors attract birds and animals. Reflections cause damage. Removing them reduces risk. I searched around and found more signs. A shed behind the cabin, locked. Snow cleared from its roof recently. A path pressed down toward the road that my arrival had erased. This place was not abandoned. It was maintained quietly. That night, the steps came again, closer to the camera this time. I watched through the window as a figure moved between trees. Not tall in a dramatic way, broad in winter gear. Snowshoes widened each step, sinking deep. The person stopped near the camera, adjusted it, then continued the loop. They never approached the cabin directly. They treated it like a boundary. In the morning, I found fresh marks near the camera and a faint drag line from equipment. Everything fit once I allowed it to. The host did not own the land in the way I assumed. The cabin served dual use, a rental when not needed, a shelter for workers during winter checks. The steps were scheduled visits, not announced because the cabin was considered empty space, not private home. The mirrors were removed because workers slept there too. Fewer breakables, fewer distractions. A place meant to endure, not comfort. I stayed one more night. The steps did not return. In the morning, I packed and left the cabin clean. On the drive out, I passed a marked truck parked off the road, half hidden by trees, tire chains, snowshoes strapped to the side. The fear came from not knowing the purpose of the place while using it. The cabin was never haunted. It was practical, built to withstand weather and time, used by people who moved through quietly and left little trace. I had stepped into a space meant for waiting out storms, not grief. Understanding that settled something in me. My dad worked with his hands. He liked places that made sense even when they felt cold. The cabin made sense once I saw it clearly. I drove back toward noise and mirrors and familiar roads, carrying less weight than I brought in.